very simple program. But once you discover all the different functions, you will see it's far more excellent than just a simple program. But as complex as a program may be in itself, it is simply there to make our lives a lot easier. But let's have a look. Exactly how does Excel do this? So let's dive into this lesson of Excel. Today's topic, what is in a name? For this lesson, we have three main objectives. So we'll start off by discovering a variety of different functions. Now these functions help us to identify exactly the different things which we need within our data. So once again, making our lives a lot easier. We will also explore exactly how we can insert an object. Now an object is not just a shape or a picture. You can even insert a whole presentation. But we'll discover this more a little bit later. And last but not least, we'll identify exactly how we can audit the different formulas. By auditing different formulas, we can understand exactly how each cell was calculated. The better you understand your information, the better your reporting will be too. But now before we jump into the fleshy part, let's see if your thinking caps are on. Do you know what the Control Up button does? If you press Control and the up arrow at the same time, it will move to the most top cell of your dataset. Completely the opposite, with Control Down, it will move to the most bottom cell of your current dataset. Left moves all the way to the left, and of course you guessed it, right all the way to the right side. So now that we've started thinking, let's jump straight into our functions. For this lesson, we'll be looking at the if error, is NA, is blank, is number, and offset errors. Now this is actually a pretty cool feature. It is a great feature which makes our formulas a lot easier to read, create, and maintain. And the best part of this feature is it's easier to use at a later stage once again. So let's jump straight into our first error, the if error. Now the if error allows you to highlight any possible errors within your formula. So in other words, the if error will return a value that you previously specified if it finds an error. Otherwise, it will return the rest of the formula. But having a look at the syntax, we can see that the if error syntax has the following arguments. Firstly, the value. Now this argument is required, and it checks for an error. Then we have the if error error. Then we have the value if error. This argument is also required. And this is the value to return if the formula evaluates an error. So different error types may be #NA, #value, #ref, #num, and many, many more. But to see this in action, let's jump over into our Excel worksheet. So here we have a list of brands. Some of these brands are from Procter & Gamble, and the other ones are from Unilever. Here we can see that each product has a different code. And of course, it comes from different companies as we specified before. But we want to find out which product comes from which company. So we can simply use the VLOOKUP and the if error function for this. So if we have a look at the next sheet, here we can see the different codes for specifically the P and G products. We've added a little bit of an extra column, and that creates different names and of course the description of the products too. So let's have a look at our worksheet and see which company the different products belong to. So here I've created another column. So we will use our VLOOKUP function. So if we want to use this function, we'll say equals to VLOOKUP and the rest of our syntax, and of course equals enter. Here we'll have the VLOOKUP and drag the formula all the way down to see which product belongs to which company. Now, just by simply looking at the information, you can simply see that we do have the NA error too. So of course, this means that something's wrong. By quickly glancing over the information, we can see that these different codes were not added to the list. So this means it's not a P&G product. So instead of trying to look for all the different ones with the NA errors, an easier way to do this is to use the if error function to identify if there is an error. So we'll use, as we said, our if error function. Typing in equals to if, we'll also use the is error function. You can simply click on it nice and easily. and we want to see if there is an error available there. We'll close our brackets. If there is an error, we want it to return with the words saying error. If not, it simply doesn't need to say anything. And close our brackets once again and press enter. Once we press enter, we'll see the error appears there. By dragging the formula all the way down, you will see exactly which errors correspond, and therefore we know that it's not a PNG product. But now an easier way to do this than to create a brand new list is to actually insert the error into our original list. So instead of using the colors and looking for NA, we can simply find a saying where it says not in the list. So we'll use our if function, once again typing in if, open our brackets, is error function. Remember, you have to close your brackets once again, add your comma. We want to say not on the list. So if it's not on the list, then of course it will say not on list instead. And close our inverted commas. Comma, we still want the company name to appear, and close our brackets once again. You may find that some information may change, so just make sure that it's correct. Once you're happy with your information, press OK. Once we press OK, you can now see that it says not on the list. Once again, dragging and dropping your formula all the way down, it will show you in nice capital letters which products possibly belong to Unilever instead of P&G. In a case like this, if you wanted to show that it belongs to Unilever instead of P&G, instead of using the words not on list, you can type in Unilever instead, and there it will show you that the product belongs to Unilever and not P&G. Now this was a nice and simple way in order to use our if error functions. Now that we have a better idea of how exactly this works, let's jump over to our isNA function and see what's in store. The isNA function forms a part of the information functions. It is there to help us to see if a cell has a #NA error. If the cell contains any of the errors, it will inform us by returning the value false. Now this is a fantastic function as it facilitates the smooth data analysis and comparisons too. It does not only test for an error, you can also choose to display a different customized message. Now if we are using the isNA function, we can use the following syntax. The ifNA function has the following argument. Firstly, the value. Now this is what we want to test. It can be a blank cell or an empty cell. Error, logical expression, text, number, reference value, or a naming reference. But it could be anything that you would like to test. If the #NA error is available, the function will say true if it is true, and if it is not, it will say false. But let's go back to Excel to see how this is done. So on this sheet, we want to see if #ref is an NA error. So we can simply do is type in equals to is NA. We need to select our data. So therefore we can select rev equal to, close our data, and we can click enter. As we can clearly see on the screen, it says false. So this means that it's not true. We can continue to do the same with different cells and see what values they will return. So of course, if it contains the ifNA error, then it will return as true. We can continue to see exactly the same with the rest too. If we add our different cells, we can see whether they are true or false. And as you can imagine, simply dropping and dragging all the way down, we can see the only one is true, as it is checking for the NA error. Now this is a very simple formula, so let's jump straight over back to Excel and have a look at our isBlank formula. So an isBlank function checks where the cell is empty, and it returns the logical values of either true or false. This function is often used together with the if function too. So the syntax for this function is as follows. Firstly, you have the value you want to check in the cell and whether it's empty or not. So it has 3 different arguments. Firstly, the logical test argument. It is a condition which wants to be tested. So it will show us if the answer is true or not. If the result is true, it will show that the condition is met. If the answer is false, it means that the conditions were not met. Now we want to ensure that there is no result if there is no data present within the corresponding cell. In this case, we received the data in the cell, and we need to use the isBlank function. Now the isBlank function, remember, only has one purpose. That's very important to remember. So let's see this happening in Excel. So for this example, we want to calculate how long it will take our company to deliver different orders. As you can see, we have the date which has been shipped on and the date which the order has been received. But now we want to see exactly how long it took each order to be delivered. Now the isBlank function is a great function to use for this. To calculate the processing time, we want to click on the cell exactly where we'd like the answer to appear. And then we want to use different functions within the if function. So we can click on the function. When we go to function, generally we'll first find all, and you'll need to search for the if function. Otherwise, of course, if you've used it already, you can find it within the if list. And click OK. Now we need to search for the logical test. So the logical test in our case would be the isBlank function. If the isBlank function is not available, you can always go to more functions. Can you remember in which area did we say this function was found? If you'd said information, you were correct. Once you've selected the isBlank function, click OK. So as now we can see in this dialog box, the value is a cell or the name that refers to cells which you want to test. So we want to test the cells in line with A4 and so on. Once you've selected that, we want to make sure that we're entering the rest of the information. So if it is true, then of course we don't want anything to appear. You can simply add 2 inverted commas in order for this to happen. And if it is false, we want to make sure that the correct data is appearing. So in our case, we want to say that C4, which is a received date, is subtracted from the date which has been shipped on, and this will give us the result in how many days which it took in order to ship the information. Once you find your result, click OK. When you've clicked OK, it will appear in the box which you have chosen. Now once again, you can simply drag and drop this formula and it will show you the number of days which it took to ship each order. Now of course, if there's no information available, there will be no corresponding data either. So this is a great function to use if we want to calculate different things. Maybe birthdays, or maybe other values which you will need within your line of work. Now that we understand the isBlank function a little bit better, let's move on to our next function, and this is the offset function. The offset function shows us a reference to a range, which is specified by the number of rows and columns from a cell or cell range. Now, most important, this can be a single cell or, like we said, a whole range of cells. You are able to specify the number of rows and columns which are returned. The offset function is an excellent way of giving Excel an address to go. So you start by telling it how many rows you want to move, how many columns you want to move, and of course, the destination where it needs to start. Now, the destination can be a single cell, or it can be many different cells. Now, you're probably thinking, why on earth would we need this type of function? Well, in this lesson, not to worry, I will provide you with a basic examples and it will make a lot more sense. But now, before we jump straight into the demonstration, let's have a look at the syntax. So you can see that the syntax is a reference, the rows, the columns, the heights, and the width. The reference is a required field, as this refers to the references from which you would like to base your offset from. Remember, it needs an initial address. It needs to refer to a cell, or a range of cells, or adjacent cells. If it does not, then it will give you the hashtag value error. Rows are also a required field. This is the number of rows which you'd like your original data to refer to. So for example, if we use 2 in our argument, it specifies that the upper left cell will have 2 rows below the reference. Now the rows can be negative, which means that they are starting above the reference, or they can be positive, which means they'll be starting below the reference. Columns is the number of columns which we want the cell to refer to. Now these columns can either be to the left or the right. When columns are negative, it makes sure that they're on the left-hand side of the starting reference. And of course, if they're on the right, it means that they will be positive. Now height is an optional argument. It refers to the height in terms of the number of rows which you would like to be returned to the reference. It needs to be a positive number. Now width is also optional and refers to the number of columns which you would want to be returned to the reference. Now this may be a little bit of a complicated syntax, considering that there's negatives and positives and left and rights. So let's jump straight over to Excel and see this in action, and trust me, it will make a lot more sense. So in this sheet, you can see that we have two columns. The first column refers to the months, and the second column refers to the corresponding sales values. We want to get the average sales from the revenue from the last 6 months. Now the problem lies in the fact that this is a dynamic report. So this means that each month new data will appear. As we can see, currently this is a very short list. So it's nice and easy for us to see exactly what the average of the last 6 months were. So what we can simply say is we can say equals to average, because we want to know the average, and then select the last 6 months. Once we selected the 6 months, we click OK, and we can see an average appearing over there. The range of data is constantly going to be increasing. So if we add 3 more months of data, of course, our average value is going to change, and it will be incorrect. And unfortunately, we'll have to take the long way of highlighting all the cells manually. But there is something which we can do in order to avoid this. It's nice and simple. We can use the offset function. So by using the offset function, we say equals to offset. You see the function appears right over there. And then of course we want our reference. Now our reference will generally be the heading due to the fact that this is the initial address of the information. Because remember, we'll be adding rows and columns too. Next, we'll be looking at the number of rows. Now of course, we don't want to be moving side to side. We only want to be moving within our rows. So let's say, for example, we add 1 for the time being. Columns, as we said, we want to stay in exactly the same column, so 0. And for our height, for the time being, will remain at 1, and of course, the width as 1, 2. Once we've collected all our information, close your brackets and press OK. As we can see now, from our original cell, which was B3, we moved 1 down. We didn't move any to the side, and our width was 1 and 1. So therefore, we should still get 150. Now let's say, for example, we want to move 3 rows down. So let's add a 3 over there, and we can simply click OK. Now you can see that it represents all the numbers from 3 rows down. So firstly, we have 150, 200, and 250, and those all correlate exactly the same. Now remember, you're not able to add all of these pieces of information into one cell, so therefore Excel's clever enough to list them one below each other. Please note, if you do have an older version of Excel, you may get the word value. But this is simply because, as we said, all 3 values are not allowed within one cell. The latest version is so clever that it shows us all the different values which are represented, and it simply represents them in different colors. Now, to understand the offset value a little bit better, let's say we want to take the average of all 3 of these numbers. So we're going to go to equals to average once again, insert our offset, and remember you want to add that double bracket and press OK. And here we get our average. Now once again, let's just quickly make sure that our function is working correctly. So we select all 3 equals to, and it gives us exactly the same value. So therefore we can see that our offset function is working the way that we want it to. But now remember, we said that this is a dynamic report, and this report will continue to be added on each and every month. So now we want to use our offset function to make sure we're getting the average of the last 6 months. So our syntax will start with creating our average. We want to make sure that we do have the average there, and of course we want to use the offset function too. Our reference will remain exactly the same. It will still be on B3. Now this is where things tend to change due to the fact that our report is constantly changing. So this means that we're going to be using the count function. Now the count function is when there's text, and the count A function is when there are numbers. So by using this function, we open our brackets and we need to select the range of numbers which we would like to use. We want to drag it further down in order for it to test all our results. And we can close our brackets once again. This time we want to add our height, which will be -6 as we want the average of the last 6 months. And of course, our width will remain exactly the same on 1. We close our brackets once again, and click OK. So we see the average over there is 259.50. But let's make sure that our function is functioning correctly once again. So just to double check, we can always add our average, make sure we get those last 6 months, and press OK. There we can see we get exactly the same function. So even when we are adding different values to the end, you will see that it will change according to the last 6 months. So now I'm sure beforehand you were asking, why on earth would you try to use this function? When you have different stats and different things changing on a constant rate, and you want to make sure that you have the most up-to-date data, using the offset function is a great way to make sure that you're getting those latest averages. Now we've already discussed so many new functions. I'm sure you need to go and practice them all before we learn any new ones. So let's change the topic just a little bit, and we'll have a look at objects. So the second topic for this lesson is how exactly we're going to insert different objects into your worksheets. Now when I say objects, you may be thinking about pictures or about different shapes. But no, this time I'm talking about PDFs, video files, a PowerPoint, or even a Word document. This could be extremely useful when you're going into a presentation. And let's say, for example, you don't want to be switching between each of the different files on your desktop. So placing them all into Excel makes it nice and convenient. But now before we go into our next topic, let's have a little bit of a brain break. Did you know you can have all of your files on one Excel sheet? This is an extremely powerful tool. As we said, especially if you're doing presentations, then there's no need for you to be fiddling around between different files. But how on earth do we do this? So first of all, you need to go to your Insert tab. This is on the right-hand side. In your text group, you can select the icon Object. You can choose to either create a file or select from a file which you can browse in a different location. Then you can choose exactly what you would like to insert. So this could be PowerPoint for our example, or it could be a video, or it could even be a Word document. But let's see how this powerful tool works on Excel. So we're going to start off by inserting a PowerPoint presentation into our Excel. So what we'll do is we'll go to our Insert tab. As we said, it's under the text group. In the text group, we have many different options, but for today, we want to insert that object. You'll see that your object display screen shows. You can either create a brand new file on Excel, or you can choose from a file which you've already created. You need to browse for this file wherever you've saved it. So let's say for this example, we're going to say that we've already saved it for ourselves on our desktop. Once you've selected the file, you can display this as an icon. Therefore, it's easier to view it on your Excel spreadsheet. But the best part is you can change the icon too. There are many different options and nice creative ways of displaying your different presentations. So once you've selected the one which you like, you can click OK. Or alternatively, you can also change the name too. By changing the name, it may be easier to allocate. Once you're satisfied, click OK, and once again, click OK. This will then insert into your Excel spreadsheet. Of course, remember, it may take a little bit of time. Now, once it's on your Excel spreadsheet, you can always double click on it and it will show a preview of this presentation. But that's not all. We can do exactly the same with a video file. We can go to Insert, and once again on the right-hand side, we can select our object, create from file, browse, and insert exactly where you'd like to click your video to be on. So let's have a look once again how this happens within Excel. So this time, we're going to be selecting the text, the object, create from a file which we already know. We're going to browse into our video, insert, display as an icon, and once again, you can choose the different icons however you would like it to be. Press OK, and press OK once again. Now you can repeat this once again into your PDF, and you know how nice and simple it is. The more you practice it, the better you'll become. So let's imagine we're doing our very own presentation. So of course, we want to start off by showing the PowerPoint presentation first. After our PowerPoint presentation, we have a little video which appears on the screen too. And last but not least, you can then show them the PDF which they will be given after the presentation is complete. So instead of having to go back to your desktop each and every time, it's nice and simple. You can simply follow all the steps and make sure that your whole presentation is in one place. Now, how convenient is that? Now, for our last topic today, as we worked with so many formulas, it is a useful trick to know exactly how we can navigate between the different formulas. We can do this by using trace elements and trace dependents too. But we'll have a look at how exactly we can show our formulas, check our errors, and sort them out. So firstly, we'll follow the following. So we need to start off by doing the following steps. Within your Formula tab, you can go to Show Formulas. And of course, there's a shortcut available too. You can simply click on Control and back. Now this is above the tab key, but we'll have a look at that in just a moment. Or you can use your predescendants. But it's a lot easier for us to see this information in an Excel demonstration. So let's jump straight over back to our workbook. So let's say we have the following data in front of us. And now we are not the creator of this file, but we need to start assessing all the basics. And we need all the prerequisites in order to analyze our report. So for example, if you've received this trial bookkeeping case, it talks about trial balance, balance ledger, and all of these different things which you may not understand immediately. So we need to understand where exactly all the numbers are acquired from. So you can either go and double click on each cell and see exactly where they're coming from, or we can do this in a very simple way. We can use what is called Show Formulas. So if we go onto our Formulas tab, we can see under the Formula Auditing, there is a Show Formulas option. Once you click on that option, you can see exactly where all the formulas come from. If you move from side to side, it may be a little bit more clear. It quickly shows us all the formulas at a single glance of the entire sheet. But now if we click this button once again, it will remove the formulas. But remember I said that there is a nice and easy shortcut. So as you can see, it's Control back. This is found right above your tab key. Now in the case where it does not actually show you where exactly the formula comes from, because as you can see, for this formula, it comes from a different sheet. So then what you can always do is go over to your trace dependents. And trace dependents will show you where the formulas come from. So in the case where it's not found on exactly the same sheet, and it may be a little bit more complicated to see exactly where it comes from, you can click on the cell and click on your trace dependents. Now it will display the connections between the cell. Now the same thing will happen if you click on more than one cell. It will show all the trace dependents on that certain cell once again. And of course, you have trace dependents too. And it will show you exactly which cells are dependent on the formulas of the previous cell. To remove the arrows, we have the Remove the Arrows option. So of course, you can either remove the precedents or the dependents, or all of them all together. Now, even though we have the arrows showing us exactly where all the formulas are coming from, it may not necessarily mean that we understand the formulas. So what we can simply do, if we don't understand the formula, click on the formula and say Evaluate Formula. In your Evaluate Formula, it will show you exactly the reference and, of course, what the evaluation is. So as you keep moving through the evaluation, it will show you what is what exactly. Once you're satisfied and you know where all your data comes from, you can click Close. In the case where there may be an error within your formula, you can always go to error checking. Now this could either be a trace error or simply just a normal error. Now luckily for us, in this case, as we can see, there is no errors found within this whole sheet, so we can simply click OK. Now as we said, this is a very simple way of evaluating your data. It's not to say that it's going to give you a clear review on exactly what's going on, but we need to know by having a glance over all the information, it helps us to see what we're working with and where exactly certain things may come from. So this brings us to the end of today's lesson. So for your challenge for today, I would like you to create your very own presentation. Insert different objects into Excel exactly as you've learned today. So you can insert your PowerPoint presentation, a video, or you can use your imagination. Create your very own professional presentation with all the knowledge which you've acquired. I hope you've enjoyed this lesson as much as I have and learned a lot too. Go out and practice all your new skills, and I'll see you next time.